Welcome to our viewers in Nigeria and across the world. Lunchtime Politics begins right now. 3 years after the Endsars protests and the twists of events that followed, Amnesty International says 15 protesters still remain in custody as police warns against gathering at the Lekki toll gate. Zamfara APC replies Governor Dauda Lawal over allegations that former Governor Matawale embezzled billions of naira meant for cargo airport as it dares the governor to show proof. An opposition People's Democratic Party asks the Oyo State Assembly to begin impeachment processes on Governor Rotimi Akeredolu over his absence from the state, in their words. Again, you're welcome to the program. Let's tell you that it's exactly 3 years since the Endsars protest against police brutalities and activities of the disbanded SARS squad of the police. It's a protest which culminated in a procession at the Lekki toll gate in Lagos, which was violently disrupted by the police. Well, today, Amnesty International says a total of 15 protesters arrested in 2020 are still being arbitrarily detained. According to a statement by the international non-governmental organization on the 3rd anniversary of the protest, the majority of the protesters are in Kirikiri Medium Correctional Center and Ikoyi Medium Security Correctional Center in Lagos without trial. It noted that the Nigerian authorities have filed what it described as trumped-up charges, including theft, arson, possession of firearms, and murder against many of the protesters, adding that some of those detained alleged that they had been subjected to torture. The Lagos State Police Command also yesterday warned that it will not tolerate any form of gathering at the toll gate in the Lekki area of the state. This is coming as some civil society organizations prepare for a peaceful march to mark the 3rd anniversary of the incident that took place on October the 20th during the Endsars protests in Lagos. And speaking on the development, Lagos State Command's police spokesperson, Benjamin Ondeyin, says no gathering or convergence whatsoever would be allowed anywhere around the toll gate. He made the disclosure through his official X handle, adding that the police will be fully on the ground to ensure security for all persons participating in the peaceful walk as long as they are not obstructing traffic. Let's head over to the courts now, where the Supreme Court will, on Monday, October the 23rd, hear the appeal by the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, which is seeking the nullification of President Bola Tinubu's victory at the presidential election. The Apex Court will, on the same day, hear the motion by Mr. Atiku seeking to bring fresh evidence to prove that President Tinubu submitted forged certificates to the Independent National Electoral Commission, that's INEC. In a hearing cited by Channels Television, the Apex Court fixed 9 a.m. for Mr. Atiku's lawyers and those of President Tinubu to address its panel of 7 justices on whether it has powers to grant the request. Also, according to that hearing notice, the court will get an address on the contentious request from lawyers from the APC and INEC, who are joint respondents in that motion. The Supreme Court will also hear the appeal by the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, and the Allied People's Movement. Also be able to address the court, are lawyers from, of course, the various parties who will be represented. Let's move over to the National Assembly now, where the House of Representatives is calling for the appointment of more justices for the Supreme Court. And the House made that call during plenary following a motion of urgent public importance moved by Patrick Umar from Akwa Ibom State. Our National Assembly correspondent, Terry Kumi, reports.
It's the final plenary session of the week in the House of Representatives as lawmakers consider a motion of urgent public importance on speedy justice delivery. The House is calling for the appointment of more justices for the Supreme Court.
Aware that the Supreme Court's docket is full for the year 2023 as parties cannot have hearing dates for matters filed within the year, except in election petitions, owing to a considerable volume of matters pending before the court. Worried that the non-appointment of new justices to the Supreme Court has stalled expeditious, effective, and efficient justice delivery, impeded transactions and economic development, limited citizens' access to justice, put the current justices of the court under immense mental and physical pressure, and has affected the policy-making function of the court.
Meanwhile, the House is worried about the plan to use concrete for road construction in the country.
Worried that the Honorable Ministry of Works' new policy on cement concrete pavement adoption without in-depth studies of the comparative advantages stroke disadvantages with asphalt may contradict technical specification, potentially leading to contract breaches and potential arbitration and litigation during a challenging economic time.
In the meantime, the lower chamber is asking for a total ban on the local production, importation, and use of any educational material that contains such words that teach or promote lesbianism, gayism, bisexual, and transgenderism in schools throughout the country.
Nigeria has cultural values. We need to strengthen our cultural values. This timely motion is needed to stop what is going on around the world. We need to stand firm. Some African countries are being bullied to join.
Mr. Speaker, as you said, in our generation, I will get personal and tell you that I moved my daughter from a school whose name I will not mention for obvious reasons. When I found out at the nursery level, they thought it was okay for bathrooms to be shared.
We cannot be importing cultures that are alien to our behavior. So, Mr. Speaker, this particular motion, I wholeheartedly will support it, and if need be, we extend it to our secondary schools and our universities.
Thank you, sir. The action of the House is in line with the existing law against same-sex marriage in the country. The House is proposing the criminalization of the importation or usage of LGBTQ content in Nigerian schools. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Well, still at the legislature, but at the state level this time around. In Oyo State, the People's Democratic Party is calling on the State House of Assembly to begin the process of impeaching the state governor, Rotimi Akeredolu, for what they describe as being away from the state for a long time. In a statement issued by the party's publicity secretary, Mr. Kennedy Perite, in Akure, the state capital, the party adds that the governor had committed what it calls an impeachable offense for staying out of the state for over 6 months, adding that the need has arisen for the assembly to commence the impeachment process against him. The party also alleges that Oyo State has been on autopilot for almost 6 months, grounding all activities of governance due to the health of the governor. The statement reads in part, "The time has come for the Oyo State House of Assembly to immediately begin the impeachment process of Rotimi Akeredolu SAN for violation of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended." It goes on to say, rather than tell the citizens the truth, most of the governor's handlers have resorted to insulting the sensibilities of the people by making a public show of their ignorance. The handling of his condition by his aides has broke the governor of, or rather has robbed the governor of public sympathy, the statement adds. And now to election matters. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, says it is inappropriate to rate the 2023 general polls by the number of petitions filed in the court. INEC's National Commissioner and Chairman of Information and Voter Education Committee, Mr. Sam Olumeko, in a statement says the electoral body has been drawn to reports which says that INEC's credibility has since sank to about 94%. He said the report suggests that the election petitions draw from the action or inaction of INEC, stressing that many litigants unfortunately file election petitions over the most improbable cases and later withdraw them, or they are dismissed by the tribunals. Well, let's switch gears now on the program and speak with the senior advocate of Nigeria, who'll be shedding some more insight, some of the major stories on the program. We're joined by Mr. Akeredolu, who's a senior advocate of Nigeria, joins us virtually on the program this afternoon. Thank you for your time, senior advocate.
Thank you very much, namesake.
Well, indeed. It's 3 years, senior advocate, after that Endsars protest. So before we get into, some major stories that concern the judiciary at the Supreme Court and other levels, I'd like to get your views about the Endsars protest, because it was a big deal then, grounded activities, and you saw a lot of people, young people mostly, troop into the streets calling for an end to police brutality. They had their demands, the 5 for 5 demands. In fact, some even pushed it and talked about an end to bad governance and the rest. 3 years after, how much progress would you say we have made, really, senior advocate?
Well, the question would be, what are the parameters for assessment or for measurement of progress? The primary reason why the Endsars protest came up was the fact that young people were unduly harassed on the streets of the major cities of the country, especially if they had a bag on, or they had a laptop, or they had phones. And the SARS group, which was essentially meant for anti-robbery, were harassing these young people. And so they came together and said it was time to get government to realize that they had been harassed for long enough and it should come to an end. To that extent, I think some measure of success has been made. I don't think young people are as harassed as they were past before we had the Endsars protest. But having said that, I think there are problems on both sides of the divide. The citizens are doing a bit in many respects, but there are other situations where also citizens also commit unnecessary crimes. I call them unnecessary. For example, you're driving against traffic, you're doing things that are just wrong in the streets. But then again, government has to make sure that those who are in the police force are properly trained. Now, training is not about being able to handle a gun or being able to do security duties, but also learning how to approach citizens and speak to us. Do not harass us. Do not make us feel less than. And the question then again is, how many of us are willing to allow our children to join the police force, having educated them in universities locally or abroad, and for them to bring the kind of sanctity and the kind of sanity that we expect in our police force? But going to your question frontally, I don't think we have had that much in terms of progress. I have had a few times when policemen have looked at me, well, maybe because of my gray hair, they do not harass me that much, but I don't think young people have had very good things to say. But I think it's work in progress. Current government should do a lot more training of the policemen and officers in realizing how they should relate with citizens, and especially young people.
And incidentally, the police also has a role to still play today, because some people, they plan to have events to mark the Endsars protest. Some are planning processions, especially around that Lekki tollgate area. And again, we have that classic debate. Aren't people allowed to still protest? And the police says, well, do not gather, do not obstruct traffic. And there's always a concern as to, isn't this in some way still trying to at least stop people from expressing themselves? So at what point should police draw that line? And at what point should the protesters draw the line? Because it's, again, becoming a thorny issue, to protest or not to protest.
The question then again also is, what is the essence of the protest? The protest is to make government and other citizens hear the protesters. They have grounds that they want people to hear. And so if they're doing that lawfully, they should be allowed to protest. I think, especially in our democracy, people should be allowed to protest if they have anything they want to ventilate. But to say that they cannot, I think would be wrong. By the same token, those who also want to protest must ensure that in doing so, they do not make life unbearable for other citizens who want to go about their lawful or their legitimate businesses. In other parts of the world also, you find protests going on, people going, organizing marches, and you find the police side by side them, just to ensure that everyone is complying with law. But to say that they cannot protest, I don't think it's very right. Then again, please do not block the toll gate. People want to go to their businesses. People may have emergencies. People may have other social reasons why they want to commute. So you cannot be protesting and making life unbearable for other people. So two wrongs won't make a right. But I think people who want to be heard should be allowed to be heard.
After all, the law is clear on how people can express, their fundamental rights,
Indeed.
the freedom of expression.
Indeed.
Incidentally, the next point of conversation actually maybe snowballs from the Endsars protest, because some will say from the Endsars protest, a lot of people got politically aware. It culminated into the election, which we witnessed some months ago, February and March. But afterwards, we've seen lots of events which have followed, from the elections to the petitions at the court. And just yesterday, INEC came out in defense of its performance at the polls, saying that it's inappropriate to rate the polls by the number of election petitions. And that is your forte, really. I wonder if you agree with INEC, because a lot of people look at the number of petitions, over 1,000, for various reasons anyway. But is it enough for INEC to wash itself clean of what some have said was the agency dropping the ball during this past election?
You see, with the last election which we have had, there are divergent views. And quite frankly, unless you were at the 700,000 or how many polling units we had, it's very difficult for you to sit in your state or your local government or your street and criticize or make categorical statements about the elections in general. But having said that, I think people, again, have the right to express themselves. The law allows you to go to the court if you are not happy with the outcome of the elections. But let me digress for a moment to the first part of your question about young people getting more aware politically and getting interested in elections, voting, and campaigning. Yes, that's a very good thing. But I was quite disappointed by the numbers that came to vote, because I thought young people in our demographics represent about 60%. So when we had about 93% bringing themselves forward to register and about 84% receiving their voters' cards, I was expecting to find about 60 million voters. We had about 25 million. So where were they? So it means that a lot of people collected their voters' cards. They spoke on social media, but they really didn't do what they had to do. Otherwise, perhaps the outcome would have been different. But going to what a newspaper has said concerning INEC, I think INEC had to defend itself. I mean, for goodness sake, if I'm sitting in my house or in my office and you bring litigation to me, I'll start my fault. And let's not forget that the Section 134, which gives the ground upon which petitions may be brought, says that it could be brought if a person was not qualified to actually contest. How is that the fault of INEC if somebody brings litigation and says, oh, for example, or you didn't go to a particular school, or you didn't have a particular qualification? INEC has to be a party, because the outcome of that petition will affect INEC. They will be required to surrender, or rather to retrieve the certificate of return from whoever they have given it to. So they would almost necessarily be a party. By the same token, everyone knows that parties or citizens have the right to fair hearing. In other words, if I'm not happy with the outcome of an election, I should be allowed to go to court. And you shouldn't criticize me going to court because I want to reduce the number of cases or petitions INEC will have to contend with. And INEC, in their response, said that a lot of the cases, a lot of the petitions were dismissed, some were even withdrawn. Don't forget, we happen to be in a society where a lot of people believe in litigation. And litigation is a good thing. It helps us to better place as well. But we must get to the point where going to court should not just be a matter of course. We're not doing so because we want to satisfy those who are our followers or who are supporters. We must go to court because indeed and in truth, that is an issue to have the courts to determine.
Right.
But as we go along, sorry, just one last point. As we go along, we must realize that the courts would have determined certain points of law again and again. And so if you keep coming back with those points of law, I think the Supreme Court should begin to award costs against counsel and litigants who do so.
A couple of issues we need to touch on, but you talked about, I mean, really it is hard, honestly, to have a picture of what went down in the over 170,000 polling units across the country. But people have specific instances that they witnessed, and a lot of them, they saw, INEC's conduct, officials of INEC, which a lot of people say some of them were compromised. We had cases of, different application of the laws. You expect that the law is quite clear, and then you see officials applying it in different manners. And a lot of people have said there seemed to be no uniformity across board. Adamawa is an example of what we saw with, one of the officials, and you know what played out then. So there are specific instances that people say, well, we saw this, we experienced this, and we think that INEC cannot entirely wash itself clean in this whole case.
Now, the Electoral Act as well identifies what what the law describes as electoral offences. Electoral offences don't apply only to us as citizens. Electoral offences also apply to the umpire. If there are people who have done wrong things at the polling units, it's easy to identify the INEC individual who was posted to a particular polling unit. We should begin to see people asking or applying for the fiat of the Attorney General to prosecute those people if the Attorney General of the Federation will not prosecute them. People should come out boldly. It's not enough to complain on social media. The provisions of the law allow you to say this man has committed a crime. I believe he should be prosecuted personally, because you see, we need to make examples of 1, 2, 3, or 4 people so that we know that the law is actually working. But I am not one to say that, once we ventilate on the social media or newspapers or on air, then that's it. No, we should take a step further. And our step going further should be to say that these people should be taken to court, made to face the music, and hopefully it will serve as a deterrent to others who want to toe the line. It's not only about violence, it's about doing underhand things at the polling units, police centers, and what have you. At the end of the day, we're going to have an analysis, a complete analysis of the elections, a complete analysis of the petitions and the decisions of the courts, and then we shall have maybe a white paper to say that this was happening. Then again, we citizens also have a responsibility. Indeed. And I've said this before on your program, that citizens must then begin to speak to their senators and House of Representatives members, saying that this area of the Electoral Act should be amended to make it more stringent and what have you. So we have a responsibility there as well.
Well, all eyes are on the Supreme Court now, Senior Advocate. The election petition is essentially there. Monday is a big day. But there's another issue which, of course, concerns this. And it talks about the Supreme Court justices. It was raised at the House of Reps yesterday that there needs to be more appointment, as at this time we have 11. Well, the Constitution, Section 230, prescribes a maximum of 21. We have 11. That's 10 shy of the maximum prescribed by the law. I wonder what your expectations are. Yes, there will be 7 for this case, but we know that there are hundreds more cases waiting to be heard. So I wonder, really, how do you think we can solve this? I know this is not the first time I'm asking you this question, but I'm hoping, honestly, it will be the last time.
I do not think it is fair to have the Supreme Court justices loaded with so many other cases, as well as these petitions, appeals from these petitions that have come before them. It's a lot of work. I think the environment they work in, the enormity of the work they have to contend with, the brain work they have to grapple with is a bit too much. And unless there's a compelling reason, I do not honestly see why some of the Court of Appeal justices today should not be elevated to the Supreme Court instantly. There's several of them we all know are competent to get onto the Supreme Court bench. There's several of them who will do the same quality of work that we expect on the Supreme Court now. So I think the the NJC, the executive should do what it has to do.
Right.
There will be 7 of them sitting for the presidential election petition, but how about the other cases? And it's also time that we also amend the Constitution so that not all cases go before the Supreme Court. That's another matter for another day.
Right. On a final note, Senior Advocate, there's what is playing out in Oyo State. There's a political angle to it. There's a legislative angle to it, but there's what the law says as well. Yes, the opposition party is asking that the governor be impeached for what he called his absence from the state for such a long time. What does the law say, really, on grounds of impeachment when it comes to either absence from office or otherwise? Is it clearly stated? Is it something you can give us an insight into?
You see, the truth is, when a governor or the president is about to leave the country for a continuous period, he must hand over to his deputy. If a governor is incapacitated on grounds of ill health and is unable to perform his functions, the appropriate thing for him to do is to hand over to his deputy governor. The governor of Oyo State has been out of the country, I'm told, for about 6 months, for a continuous period of 6 months. If that is correct, then indeed and in truth, I believe that he should hand over to the governor, or he should resign from office as governor of Oyo State, and the deputy should take over for people. Because in the event of death, for example, the deputy takes over. We had that experience when the president died. Former President Goodluck Jonathan became president. So it's not exactly a new scenario. And unfortunately, we are very political. And when I say political, I'm not even saying now in a positive way. It would seem that we want to occupy office at all costs. I'm sorry to say that, but unfortunately, Mr. Akeredolu, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, knows that at this point in time, the proper thing would be for him to relinquish office. It's the right thing to do. And this is one of the ways that we can also help to build our democracy. If you're governor today and you're not governor tomorrow, heavens will not fall. That's my view.
And it's important to also state that we definitely wish him the very best state of health, wishes that he comes out of this even stronger, all in all. But we'd like to thank you so much, Mr.
I wish him sound health as well, and I hope he can rest and recover fully from his ill health.
Absolutely. Being a colleague, of course, as well. So I understand.
Yes, indeed.
You'd share those sentiments. But I'd like to thank you so much, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Akeredolu, for your insights on the program this afternoon.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful.
And just before we go, well, the All Progressives Congress in Zamfara State has been reacting to the allegation against former Governor Bello Matawalle over alleged embezzlement of funds meant for the multi-billion naira Zamfara Cargo Airport project. The party's publicity secretary, Yusuf Idris Kusol, claims that the Dauda-led government should know that the cargo airport contract was based on what is called contract financing, which in this case is between Zamfara state government and private entities, whereby funded banks have to assess every step in the progress of work being carried out and raise certificate for or before payment is effected. The APC claims that the project was made on that basis and, of course, doesn't compromise many components, making attainment of over 30% stage of work completed. And of course, the party is also asking that the governor provides proof to this. This is an ongoing development which we're following here at Channels Television. I would like to thank you so much for being a part of the program. I'm Akeredolu. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.